I cannot think of a more deserving writer to receive the Eugene L. Scott Award than my friend, my hero, Chris Clarey.
George has been my role model in chief since my earliest days in this crazy business of ours. It's for the way you write and also for the way you treat people. So thanks for being here tonight. It means a lot to me. And I also, of course, want to thank the Hall of Fame, and I want to thank Todd Martin in particular, because Todd and I actually started out together in a way. My very first French Open that I covered way back in 1991 was also Todd's first French Open in the main draw. And unlike me, he got to the fourth round. And he got there despite having to put up with all my rookie, long-winded questions that I was asking him all along the way. And Todd also is still, I've been doing this for 30 years, he's the only guy I've ever interviewed while he was getting massaged. True story. Prague, 1996, Davis Cup, and Todd decided to do it in the back room there, and I think he was pretty comfortable, a lot more than I was, actually. So Todd, thanks very much, and to the Hall of Fame, thanks very much. And above all, I want to thank you for allowing me the great privilege and rare honor of leaving the U.S. Open press room at a reasonable hour. That doesn't happen very often. Usually I close the place down, and usually the writing starts just about now. Nobody knows that better than my wife. Little did she know what she was getting into. About summer of 1985, a French exchange student from Paris walked into my parents' front door as a visitor, and she didn't speak a whole lot of English. And I didn't speak much French at all, I can tell you that, after slacking off in French class all through high school. But here we are, 33 years later, with our 3 French-American daughters, of whom we're so proud. Toscan, Savine, and Beryl. And here we are 33 years later with a lot of stamps in our passports and a lot of memories. And Virgie, I couldn't have done it without you. There's no chance. I could have chased everything around the world, chased this sport, this great sport, and covered so many things without your patience and your understanding and your forbearance. So many deadlines, so many changed plans, so many late nights, and so much distracted living. It's a very modern term, but it's applied for a while. And I just want to say in French, merci beaucoup and je t'aime. And I'm so glad you walked through that door. I'm also really grateful to tennis, which was brought to me by my mother and my grandmother, who were both passionate players and, above all, passionate tennis fans. My house during Grand Slams when I was growing up was just people yelling at the television. It was either Chrissy or Martina or whoever it was something going on. Always that kind of thing. So it's actually been really nice as a journalist to go to the slams myself and get that kind of peace and quiet actually watching the matches. My grandmother, who I called Nana, was particularly fanatical about tennis. Every year, on December 21st, she would send out 2 birthday presents well ahead of time. One was to her beloved and only grandson, that was me. And the other one was to a different Chris, that was Chris Everett. And I'm still not sure which Chris my Nana loved more, actually, after all this time. But Nana wanted to make me a tennis champion, so she spent the money on the coaching and the training. I think we even had a fitness coach for a little while when I was young. And here I am, I'm a tennis writer. So it didn't quite work out as she planned, but I did play, as George mentioned. I played junior tennis when I was in Hawaii. I played high school tennis in San Diego. I played college tennis when it wasn't snowing at Williams College in the Berkshire Mountains. And I won a few matches. I lost a lot more. But I think I realized from playing, the main realization was that how hard it was under pressure to hit the kind of shots that the great players can hit and make look so easy. This was absolutely no help to me whatsoever when I was playing tennis. Quite the contrary, actually. But it's been a great help as a tennis writer, because I've always tried. I think the most important thing when you're a tennis writer is to have a critical eye and be objective about what you see. But I think it's also been very helpful to me to remember how hard this game can be under pressure, how tough it can be when the nerves spark up. And I've always tried to remember that when I write and have a bit of empathy, even though I've never been in a stadium with 23,000 people. When Todd told me I got this award, I went back and looked at people who'd won it before, and it's quite a list. A lot of great champions and a lot of wonderful commentators like Dick Enberg and Mary Carrillo. I was really touched that they chose to honor the Hall chose to honor a print journalist this time. A regular, bona fide, unglamorous print journalist. But the award's named for Gene Scott, after all. And Gene is somebody who wore a lot of hats in tennis. But from what I've heard, and I think he really valued the hat that he wore when he was writing about tennis the most. And so, that means a lot. We didn't have a long-standing relationship. We only talked a couple of different times. But I felt like he really understood the game. And for me, it's been a real pleasure to follow his work in Tennis Week and places like that. The problem is, what Gene loves to do and what I love to do with writing about tennis and writing in general, it's an imperiled thing. There's a lot of trouble in journalism, a lot of trouble in tennis writing. There are fewer and fewer publications who are willing to send reporters around the world to write about tennis. Fewer and fewer full-time tennis writers. If you look at that big bustling press room in the US Open, which looks so full and vibrant, a lot of those people are freelancers just scraping to get by. The other issue, I think, is the way the world is changing in terms of communication. A Twitter message or an Instagram post that can take 1 or 2 seconds to make, several seconds, can often generate more buzz than a big detailed article where people have spent a long time trying to research and report very objectively. It can take weeks or months. And that's a problem, I think, for our society in general. But I also feel like, for me, journalism, it's being there. It's being there, looking in people's eyes, having those interviews face to face. It's watching the match courtside, not from your computer. And that, to me, is what it's all about. So I want to thank the people that have allowed me to do that through the years, and try to be a constructive critic. That's my goal. So I want to thank, first of all, some of the players, past and present, and I want to thank some of the administrators and the coaches who've taken the time, even though it wasn't always terribly convenient, to answer my questions or my phone calls. Some of you are here tonight. I want to thank my first bosses in the business, Barry Lords in San Diego, the late, great Barry Lords, Neil Amder, who was my first sports editor at the New York Times, and both Barry and Neil were former tennis writers, so that was why they supported so much covering the game of tennis. I want to thank our tennis editor, who's not here tonight because of Serena's situation, Nyla Jean Myers, one of the best editors I've worked with. And I also want to thank the institution that I work for, the New York Times, for trying to spend the money and the resources to get the story right, anonymously or otherwise. And as some has alluded to tonight, it's a tough time in tennis, too. It doesn't look that way when you watch it and you see these great stars that are still thriving, the Nadals and the Federers and the Djokovic's and the Serenas. The Grand Slams are thriving. There's a buzz. I've been covering the Slams since 1990, and you can see the growth and the explosion of interest in those venues. It's remarkable. And yet, behind the scenes, and Cliff Drysdale, who I can see from here, would remember this very well from his days with the ATP in those critical years. There's a great deal of division right now. I've been covering the game for 30 years. This is one of the worst turf wars that I've seen. And I just feel strongly that in a situation where there is so much competition around the world for entertainment, so much competition for people's hearts and minds and screens, that the last thing tennis needs right now is division and confusion. What it really, really needs is cooperation and compromise and a shared vision of where the sport needs to go, one that people can understand and follow easily, not need a master's degree to understand in terms of where the points come from. So I wish that for tennis, and I also feel we're at a critical stage with the sport right now, with the change of generations that's going to come in both the men's and women's game at the top. I think tennis needs to look at itself and be very honest about what makes it special and what makes it unique. And for me, call me old school, and this is going to be a big topic tomorrow morning in your newspapers and websites and everything else. I believe that tennis is still best served by its champions and would-be champions walking out on those big courts alone, facing each other as individuals, trying to take on their own demons, their own desires, their own dreams, and face those down themselves without a coach coming on the court to try to help them out. I'm sure if Gene Scott were with us tonight, he would have made a bunch of these points, probably way ahead of me. But I appreciate the chance to honor his spirit by mentioning them here. And I also want to finish up on this special night for my family and friends. On table 11, come see us afterward. And I want to make a couple toasts to two things that I hold dear. The first, I don't have a glass, but symbolic, is to truly independent, unfettered journalism. So a toast to that. And another toast to tennis. It's a grand old game. And both those things to me are worth fighting for. So I thank you, and good night.